Great. Hello, welcome everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to our session, The Artificial Intelligence Risks and Rewards of Embracing AI to Advance Gender Equality. My name is Shirin Vezin, and I'm from Tech Change. I will be your moderator for this session. You won't be hearing much from me. I am joined by three fantastic panelists, Geeti Patwal, Mariana Carrillo, and Ronda Železný-Green, who will be sharing their thoughts, their research, and their insights on this topic that I think this group will hopefully find really interesting and engaging. Over the next hour, we'll delve into several of these subtopics and explore the question, does AI have a rightful place in advancing gender equality? A bit of housekeeping. These panelists are all very keen to have audience participation. So please do not hesitate to enter your questions in the chat as we go throughout the session. We will try our best to answer them as we go through. We'll also reserve a bit of time at the end for a more formal Q&A, if you will. But first, before we jump in, we'd like to hear your thoughts. We want to know what you think about this topic, and primarily we're interested in what concerns you. That's how we're going to kind of start off. So I invite you to go to menti.com, enter the code you see on the screen, or if you prefer, you can scan the QR code. I believe we will also have in the chat a link directly to Menti. And here what we're asking you is to kind of, I guess, do something quite difficult, which is to summarize in one word, what, if you had to summarize in one word, what would your concern about AI and gender be in that one word? Summarize it in one word. And in a moment, we will reveal all of your collective answers. So go to the link you see in the chat, enter the code, or scan the QR code. Again, the prompt is, if you had to summarize your concerns about AI and gender in one word, what would that word be? And if you can't possibly come up with just one, you can enter it a couple of times. It's a little hack. All right, so while you do that, let me please take a moment and introduce our panelists. So Mariana Carrillo is a technical advisor and gender focal point at GIZ for the Data for Policy project. She is a data and policy analyst with extensive experience in the public and international cooperation sectors. Mariana has worked for the Mexican federal government and as a data analyst for projects in Germany and Latin America in the sectors of combating violence against women, anti-corruption, agriculture, and health. Since 2021, she has been at GIZ, working both to support and lead the implementation of projects related to gender data gaps, health, digitalization, and data use in 8 countries in Latin America, Sub-Saharan Africa, and Asia. Mariana's colleague, Geeti Patwal, is a technical advisor for the Data for Policy initiative, also at GIZ. Over the last 5 years, Geeti's work has spanned multiple domains, including digital transformation, financial inclusion, and gender. Prior to her work at GIZ in her current role, she spent time at UNESCAP on a multi-country project focused on women's financial and digital inclusion in the Asia-Pacific region. And last but certainly not least, Dr. Ronda Železný-Green is a digital change maker who has dedicated really her entire career to creating systems that empower Black people, women, people with disabilities, and other marginalized populations in the technology and education sectors. Ronda's work as a mobile technologist, trainer, and researcher has spanned 5 continents and the private, public, and civil society sectors. As a Black and Native American British cis woman excelling with ADHD, Ronda has also extensive experience delivering action-oriented training that integrates the themes of racial equity, justice, and gender with global perspectives. So we have quite a panel, as you can see, And I'm excited for them to get the chance to share their thoughts, insights, and perspectives with you in just a moment. So, oops. All right, so for the big reveal, I hope folks have had the opportunity to enter the poll as we've been talking here. So again, if you had to summarize your concerns about AI and gender in one word, what would it be? Let's see what you've said. Okay. All right. I think the, all right, we still have some answers coming in here. Great. Well, I think what we'll do now, panelists, I'd love to hear from you. If you had to answer this question, which I'm going to ask you to do now, tell us what your word would be, and then please maybe illustrate that answer with an everyday example, something that that might be derived from something from the culture in which we reside, to get us started. So let's see. Let's start, Rhonda. Why don't we start with you?
Hi, thanks, Sharon. So I will start with the word overlooked. To borrow one of the words from the data.org campaign that we recently launched on gender. And I say overlooked because from my own personal experience, the women who are in the field of AI, the women who look like me and who identify as women and are Black or even Indigenous, are very much overlooked, and they are not even well represented. And so I think some of the latest conversations, particularly as it relates to generative AI, have been a textbook example of the erasure of Black women like Timnit Gebru, who have long been warning about the dangers of AI, particularly from a Black feminist perspective. And so I think overlooked, for me, sums it up quite nicely.
Thanks, Rhonda. P.T.?
Yeah, sure. I think I have like 3 words because they're all interrelated to each other and still very related to what is on the screen. So I think representation, and I see like a lot of bias, male domination here. So I would say representation, again, diversity, which is related to also representation, and democracy in artificial intelligence. And why? Because, well, with lack of it, we are risking, or rather seeing, that digital public spaces are becoming more homogeneous and are pretty much replicating the biases and the challenges of the non-digital spaces. And an example that I relate from my work, but also personal experiences when I look at gig work, and without really naming platforms right now, when women are signing up for this work, there are algorithms that suggest them the categories of gig work, and these suggested categories naturally tend to include beauty, massage centers, etc. And similarly, female gig workers have experienced that their profiles are rather really picked up when it comes to more technical work. Now it is a reality that women are overrepresented in certain sectors, and it is the people and platform biases combined. But having said that, not being able to account for this in platforms is kind of perpetuating the same gender norms, basically. Yeah, so I would have these words combined, which I pretty much see are represented somewhere already in the word cloud.
Great. Yes, no, absolutely. I think that of course, we're seeing a few synonyms here. So yeah, I think what, but what I didn't see, I don't know if I see overlooked in here, Rhonda's word. I think that deserves a place on this board. Yeah. Mariana, what about you? Anything that you don't see on the board, or something that you do see on the board that speaks to you as encapsulating your concerns?
Yeah, I mean, actually, really, like everything that's in the screen, it really resonates with me, and I can only second Rhonda's and Kitty's already contribution in terms of, for me, a word would be amplification, and that's also a word that's not here, but it's related to everything that's been already mentioned. Because I think that my concern with AI is not only that there's like this bias that already exists, but rather the amplification of the existing bias that they are already there, right? Because in the end, we are using AI, and then if we keep using AI without actually reflecting on different implications. As Ronda and Giti already mentioned, this not only perpetuates bias, but it also amplifies this, and it can, you know, like lead to the widening of the of gaps between different groups that are already underrepresented, and this can lead to even more deep, you know, like underrepresentation of certain groups of population, and in the end, like different other consequences in terms of policy decisions and in our day-to-day lives. So that's my word. I would say amplification, and yeah, I can only second what my fellow panelists already said.
Thank you, Mariana. Yes, I think amplification, perhaps even acceleration, right? The speed at which some of this duplication and amplification is happening, I think is really concerning. So we're going to take a step away from the word cloud now, but feel free to keep it in your minds, panelists, as we move into the next section, where I'd like you to kind of share with the audience what does all of these concerns we're surfacing now in a broader context, what do they mean for the work that you're doing? How are you seeing some of these things show up in your work? And I think maybe we'll start again with Ronda.
Great. So one of the things you didn't mention in my bio, I actually work as the digital learning director at data.org. And so data.org is a relatively young organization. It was started in January 2020 with the express mission to help build the field of data for social impact. And one of the areas of work is in data talent. And so I previously led our Capacity Accelerator Network. And now that capacity building is a horizontal within my organization, I'm focusing specifically in curriculum development, digital learning, and then also how we socialize the same out in the field, as we might call it. And so we focus primarily on supporting people who identify as women in low and middle income countries. But actually, let me correct myself to say low and middle income contexts, because our areas of operation include the United States, which, being a Black American, I know the challenges there, and it is not the land of milk and honey for everybody. So that's that. We also work in South America, Africa, and in India. And so part of my work, the leadership that I provide at the organization, is around the capacity building angle. So we absolutely know, we've been told for years, that there's a leaky pipeline when it comes to STEM professions and STEM studies. So this pipeline does not begin to leak at the university level, but it starts all the way back, to my daughter's age. She's 4. So I'm already inundating her with science and math and STEM and everything else, because if she wants to pursue that, I want that to be an option for her. But we have done such a poor job to date with this that in a report that actually came out from UNESCO last month in March, it highlighted that in the field of artificial intelligence, only 22% of professionals are women, just 22%, not even a quarter. And then all the AI conferences that are currently out there, just 18% of the authors at these conferences are women. And you only need to look no further than Twitter, which is my social media platform of preference, than to see that as these conversations on generative AI take place, you have some of the same people speaking, and it's very often not women. So, for example, I didn't know until many months later that the chief technology officer at OpenAI is a woman. And it's like, you would think this would be something very well known. So we're trying to flip the script and change the narrative at data.org by making sure we do our part to help build the field of data for social impact, but with people who are not the majority in terms of the identity. So we're looking at people who identify as women, prioritizing people in low and middle income countries. We're also making sure that we examine things like their socioeconomic status, their caste, and then also whether they're leavers from education. So as many of you know, many of the tech billionaires never even finished college. And so we're really trying to underscore the fact that you may come at the data sector from many, many walks of life. And we need all of you, and we need particularly more women, because as chatbots continue to run amok with not only racism, but also misogyny, you can't help but think if there were more of us, like the presenters on this call, in that room, creating, deciding, and so forth, we would have a completely different experience. So we're working to plug that leaky pipeline to help get more women into this field and to have them helping to make change that we so desperately need.
It really would be a different world, wouldn't it? You know, and I think it's quite encouraging to know that when we sought to put a panel together for this topic, all of the people who were recommended to us to speak on this topic happen to be women. So perhaps coincidence, perhaps a sign of the future.
Tech change is ahead of the curve then.
Well, let's put the question to either of you, Mariana or Giti, whoever wants to take this question. I think we have time for one of you, and then we'll move into our next topic. So what does this mean in your work context?
I mean, I can also give a very specific example right now. I think like one of the biggest challenges that we face when we're using AI in our work, especially at GSET and in data for policy, is very related to what Ronda was saying, you know, like the representativity of data. And what does this mean if this data is used actually for making decisions? And because, I mean, as we know, data collection, like bias in data, starts like way before, like starts even before you start collecting the data. So it can be bias. It's like bias mitigation is like an ongoing process, right? And it can start like from the beginning, the way how you frame a question. For example, if you're going to be using NLU for analyzing, you know, like open-ended surveys or questions that you ask, you need to be very aware of how you're framing certain questions. If you are not introducing bias on the first time, like on this first stage of data collection, because that way you might be also, you know, kind of misleading the way you're getting your data, and that's why it's also so important, you know, like to test and identify which are other potential sources of bias, and especially if we are trying to generate this data to get to know what would be the best solutions or what would be the best policies that could eventually support people who identify as women to access better opportunities. You know, like that's certain one very important aspect of what we're right now doing. And also a very important aspect that Ronda mentioned was like actually to going out and reaching out to everyone, like not only, you know, like the low hanging fruits in terms of, you know, like people that are around the environments of the people who are actually trying to collect this data and then analyze it, but actually going out and then reaching out to the sectors of the population that might not be eventually, or that do not have necessarily access to certain technologies, especially if you're collecting data through a chatbot, for example. What does that mean? You know, like just collecting data via a WhatsApp chatbot or via an SMS survey. You are having so many assumptions about, you know, like the access of technology. And we know that women have way less access to technology than men worldwide. And this, in the end, has a lot of implications on the output that you will have on data. And in the end, you will be amplifying. This is also what I mentioned in the beginning. This would lead to an amplification of already existing barriers for women. And that's exactly the opposite of what we want to do. And also related to the initial question, no, whether AI has actually a rightful place to advance gender equality. It does have, but I guess it's like a sword with two sides. Like it can be really, you know, like a tool that we can harness to pursue gender equality, or it can be really something that is actually amplifying this already existing gap between the different sectors of a population. So, yeah.
Yeah, that double-edged sword is coming through, I think, loud and clear there. And I think, Giti, some of your work does also talk about this implication component. So maybe if you want to add a few words there.
Yeah, I mean, I'll echo Mariana's words. I think the pain points of policymaking processes are in a way stemming from the errors in evidence already. When when it comes to artificial intelligence and when it comes to rather taking the human component away, then you are lacking representation. You are and in AI models it just gets amplified. Yeah, so I'm seeing more and more. I mean, like in our work with the data for policy with policymakers, we are seeing more and more interest for policymakers to use artificial intelligence. It's a buzzword. Everybody wants to use new tech. But what is scary is that you have such an inaccurate baseline, especially when it comes to gender data, that you're building models on that. It is very hard to get this accurate baseline, and you're building models which have historic exclusions. And that is why you are going to perpetuate these inequalities.
Okay, everybody take a breath. We have this is a lot of heaviness here. We're talking 22% of women in AI, 22% of AI professionals are women, 18% of AI conference authors are women. These are very small numbers. We're talking about the inaccurate baseline, the implications for policy. Okay, but we do have some promising applications and some promising work to try to, let's say, overcome, overturn, fill gaps. And I think that's where we'd like to turn next. And I think there's some really interesting work being done by each of the organizations here on this panel, each of the individuals on this panel. So I think I'd like to move us into that sort of segment. Let's bring some sunshine. Let's give some hope to those who are listening in. So maybe we'll first turn to you, Mariana. I'd love to hear a bit more about some of the promising applications that you have been working on, the use case that you've kind of referred to here a couple of times, on how AI is being used in that context to try to narrow the gender equality gap. And I think you have let me know when you want me to share the resource, and I will do so.
Yeah, I mean, it would be great if you can share like the visuals, because I think it's like easier to kind of get like a general overview of the use case. And yeah, like as Shirin mentioned in the beginning, Giti and I we work for the GIZ, and the GIZ implements Germany's projects in terms of policy, in like cooperation policy. And one of the priorities of the BMZ, which is our commissioning party, and it's to foster a feminist development policy. And we are part of this digital transformation cluster. And specifically, as we've already mentioned, the Data for Policy project. And what we look is really to support policymakers to actually take advantage of the different data sources that are out there, and how can they be actually used to advance or to be able to reach the social development goals in their countries. In this case, more specifically, we are supporting Mexico City's government to reach a greater gender equality through the use of different data sources. And this is also why I said in the beginning that I think that AI can be used as a catalyzer to actually pursue gender equality. But I think this is something we must be aware, and we must do in a very critical way. So the use case that we are doing together with the Ministry of Women from Mexico City is titled Enabling Women's Economic Empowerment. So as we all know, unpaid care work is it's a very unequal burden for men and women. And so for OECD countries, this is like a socioeconomical phenomena that's not only for low and middle income context, like Ronda mentioned, but it's like a worldwide phenomenon. And women, in average, in OECD countries, we spend over like almost a little bit more than twice the time that men use for unpaid care and housework. And in some countries like Mexico, this number is up to almost three times more time that women use for this type of work in comparison to men. And if we were to monetize this amount, it would be representing Mexico's 20 of the GDP. Like, this is huge. So this also shows that gender inequality does not only is like wrong in terms of human rights, in terms of equality, in terms of equity, but that this also has like huge economic implications. And it's in interest of our partner, you know, like the women's ministry to not only advance gender equality for the sake with a human rights perspective, but also, you know, like in the terms of economic recovery after COVID. So what we're doing together is we are using different data sources from satellite imagery to have a more granular understanding of the context, because Mexico City is like a very, very big place, like, and it's very unequal. So even though Mexico has like a very mature data ecosystem, the granularity of the data sometimes does not allow to focalize very specific actions to actually help the people and come to the people that need it. We're also collecting data from people who identify as women all around the city through a WhatsApp chatbot, but with a hybrid way. So it's not only through people like through a normal WhatsApp, but we are also partnering with a feminist local organization that's helping us to collect data that's like open-ended, and we are analyzing with a natural language understanding model. And all of these, we are kind of merging it with different available data sources to put this together into an intelligent platform that supports decision makers to identify which policies can reach those people who actually need it, especially women, and which actual interventions are needed for women to access gainful employment. Because, I mean, there's a lot of theories, there's a lot of hypotheses about what women might need in order to be able to work. But what do women want? What do women? Like, nobody actually has cared to ask women what do they want in order to be able to have access for better working opportunities. And we're doing this together with the White Ribbon Alliance, which is also an amazing organization. And what we're trying to do here is actually building meaningful connections of different data sources. And like, we are using AI in different parts of the project, not only through the natural language processing part, but also with the satellite imagery identification model. And what we're trying to do is support policymaking by not only financing this project, but also putting a very special focus in what Ronda mentioned in the beginning, which is capacity building. It's capacity building, especially for female policy and decision makers within the administration, and also filling this gender data gap that is like really it lacks, you know, like the information. How can policymakers support or finance interventions that eventually will help women to have better opportunities for gainful employment if they do not really know what's needed? So Aditi might tell you a little bit more about how this approach is part of like a bigger picture that we have in mind at GIZ, and because it's a use case. So the aim of this project is to be scalable and to be able to have impact and adaptable approaches in different contexts. So I give it over to Giti.
Thanks, Mariana. So Mariana already mentioned this term now, gender data gaps. So as mentioned previously, one thing that is leading to a lot of bias in AI models is basically having the inaccurate baseline. And we learned from Mexico in that sense that there is lack of accessible information to decision makers. And with that, we thought that we need to look at institutional approaches in which our decision makers or policy makers can somehow fill this gender data gap to make this baseline better so that we can develop better AI. AI is here to stay. It's a matter of whether or not it's going to be effective. So the Gender Data Labs was conceived with this information in mind. We are basically looking at the demand and supply gap for data. And in many countries, this data, or at least majority of this data used for decision making, is coming from the national statistical offices in the form of analysis from big national surveys that are undertaken periodically, sometimes the ad hoc data that is taken periodically. This is where majority of this data is coming from. Our idea is that the such labs will basically serve as institutional mechanisms within the statistical offices of our partner countries to ensure that this gender data flows to policymakers or decision makers and enhances their decision making. So now on the demand side, the lab will have primary function of identifying what gender data is not easily available from existing resources. And on the supply side, the lab will also have a function of improving overall accessibility to this data. So existing data that is very much available to policymakers. So in basically nutshell, improving dissemination. Now, when we look at the policymakers, there's also an angle of helping them identify what their data needs are, what their data demands are, and to be able to communicate that to NSOs such that these processes can really turn around how they receive data and what their baseline is. And same applies for the NSO. So these demands, when received by the NSO, enables them to look at like alternate data sources, new data sources, and gather more data. Now, if historically your data is just not available to you, you still have to manage to get it from somewhere. And there are a lot of resources available for this. For instance, you collect the data from CSOs, from academics, more systematically, but also sort out upcoming digital sources. With this, the main idea is for us to improve the baseline we were talking about, and for AI tools to be developed in a way that they are developed from a better baseline. We are at a very starting stage at this, and it would be great for us to also get or exchange ideas on how similar work has been implemented in different countries. Yeah, I stop here.
Wonderful. I mean, I think we're starting to spark some questions here in the audience. Maybe we'll take a moment to ask this question here, and then we'll talk about capacity building in a moment, because I think that's a topic that has really been bubbling up at multiple points throughout this conversation. So we have a question from Christy. How is this approach improving decision-making versus having traditional surveys or focus group discussions with women? Maybe for you, Mariana. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, Christy, that's a very interesting question. And so basically what we're doing, something I did not mention, is that we're collecting 10,000 responses of women. So from all around Mexico City. Usually the sample of a census, like a census it's done every 10 years. And for the sample for a city like Mexico City with around 30 million inhabitants would be around 2,000 women. Well, not women, would be 2,000 people, sorry. So, and of course, the census is always, it's also something really tricky in terms of it's yes and no questions, multiple choice questions. And the approach we're having is really, we are designing the questions with a very diverse group of women and people who identify as women. We're having a design question like testing, different testing rounds with different actors. And in the end, we do not frame any answers. These are open-ended answers that are in the end analyzed with a natural language understanding model. And what we do is we cross this information with different data sources, which means that this allows us to create meaningful connections between what are the responses that are popping up, and what does this, is there like a geospatial pattern to this? Like, is this localized? Is this something that this specific district is lacking? And I mean, like, you can have different traditional surveys or focus group, but like for like bigger amounts of data that could have give you like a more insightful like a bigger insight about certain geographical patterns or certain patterns that are related to other socioeconomic phenomena that are related to the territory. This approach is like more suitable, and it has a lot of advantages versus like a traditional traditional method. And I am aware of the time, so I will just stop it there.
I mean, I think it's fascinating and shocking to me that only 2,000 individuals would be the sample size for a census. And yet through this method, you're able to source, did you say 10,000, Mariana? It's 10,000?
Yes, yes, actually, it's
It's
different. I
incredible.
mean, of course, like, yeah.
Wow. So really powerful. I think coming back to kind of this other theme that we've been circling around, which is capacity building or capacity strengthening, would love to hear from each of you, or each of your organizations. Perhaps we'll do that. Kind of what role do you see capacity building playing in mitigating these risks and furthering the promising practices? So I think we're looking at this from a couple of different very interesting angles. So Rhonda, let's maybe start with you there, since this is a big focus of data.org's work.
Sure. So I would say, I can use this as an opportunity to spotlight some of the work of one of our partners. So since we began, we've been doing all of our work through partnerships. We're a platform for partnerships. And one of them, the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Data, we actually launched a partnership with them last November in Accra. And so what they are doing over the next 3 years is developing and deploying a program of basically data fellows, and 40% of the participants must be women. So if you are in Africa and you are working there in STEM and in any profession, you know that, comparatively speaking, even to places like the US or in India, the representation of females or people who identify as women is substantially lower. And so this ambitious project in partnership with my organization is something that we're really hoping will become a template as well for what can be done to help strengthen capacity for those people who need it most. Because often people say you have to have a seat at the table. And I'm like, no, we're going to pursue another type of furniture altogether, because we can't, reform what is already quite bad. And we need new ideas, and those new ideas are going to come from having new people at the table. And so often when I talk about the importance of capacity strengthening, some of this can even begin with something as simple as data. Meaning that, to understand what needs to be fixed and to have an idea of how you go about fixing things, you need to know the scale of the problem. So I wanted to name check Dr. Caroline Criado Perez, who has amazing work in gender data, but then also my mentor, Dr. Nancy Hafkin, who particularly for ICTs, including data in Africa, she has been saying for decades that we need the data to really understand the scale of the problem. And so I think, as we get capacity strengthening, not only around being able to process and manipulate data and to create things with data, we also need to not forget about things like the basics of data collection, who's designing instruments, who's out there doing surveys, how is that data being processed and analyzed in ways for consumption. And so I think one of the things I really like about our work at data.org is that we don't just focus on what is quote unquote sexy or a la mode right now, meaning data science and data engineering, but we look at the entire data value chain to come up with, okay, what are some of the interventions from a gender perspective that we can, use to address some of these very persistent issues.
Thanks, Rhonda. And I think, obviously our two organizations, TechChange and data.org, have done some work in this realm as well together. We're very grateful for Rhonda's and data.org's sponsorship of the current round of Gender Data 101, which is a course that we've now delivered, I think 3 times. And this time is really has a really nice refresh and some really interesting case studies. And
we had over double the demand for this run as well. So thank you for that prompt, Sharon. I'm remiss in not mentioning that. We actually had a session earlier today, my time, where 4 of the participants from the Gender Data 101 course that we ran with TechChange spoke about how those 3 months that they spent learning with us have resulted in immediate impact for them, including one woman who works at Save the Children in Cote d'Ivoire. And so for me, I think, these types of opportunities, we prioritized in that offering people with disabilities, people who identify as women, people who live in low and middle income countries. And we did that intentionally because, again, the capacity strengthening has to go hand in hand with the principles of intersectionality, inclusion, diversity, equity, and access, because it's no point in having more of the same. That true diversity of thought is going to be so key to this. So yes, and thank you for that, Sharon, because I think one other important thing to tell the audience is that in the months ahead, we're going to be doing even more data learning and data training from data.org. So stay tuned for that.
That's great, Rhonda. Thanks, and we'll make sure to. I think in the chat you should see at some point. I think hopefully there's been a lot since we posted that, but earlier on in the chat thread you should see some resources from data.org, so you can kind of follow what they're doing and connect and kind of keep up to date on the latest with Rhonda and what her team are up to. But of course, when it comes to capacity building, we also want to think about those on the policymaking side. And I think, Geeti, you referenced this, Mariana, you did as well. So maybe kind of circle back to that a little bit for us, Geeti, and talk just a bit about what you're doing on the policymaker side.
I think I'd go back to your first question on how do you see capacity strengthening as the importance of it. I think it is almost at the core of it, like Rhonda said. And by this, it is important to understand that by capacities, we are not always talking about turning all decision or policymakers into data scientists. Of course not. That is not what is going to happen, even if we wish that it happens. So by capacities, we also mean general awareness of what biases could look like. And I mean, absolutely what Rhonda said on intersectionality. Now we need our decision makers to be aware of what the AI biases that could and would exist with anyone's willful blindness on things, to not account for these various intersections or various factors. And while it could be with many factors like geographical locations, economic status, or so, I think gender blind or gender neutralness has been seen as something fairly common. On the other way around, it is also true that we don't need all data scientists to also become political scientists. It is not that everybody is going to be super aware of these various intersections. We don't live in a perfect world, but we do need important public policy decisions based on AI to be able to account for both these things. So training data for your AI tool must be definitely vetted by a diverse set of people, preferably by people who have comprehensive understanding of what these issues look like in the society. So yeah, and then over to Mariana, because I know that she's also directly worked with the ministry in Mexico on this, and we might be able to share her own personal experiences in this.
Thank you, Geeti, for passing it over. And yeah, I will have to jump off the call before because I need a train to catch. But just connecting this smoothly to Geeti's question, and also something that we were talking about before, which is what would it take for donor agencies, CSO, to work together to continue in this, kind of positive trajectory, joining efforts towards not only using AI for social impact, but also, focusing on where are these leaky pipelines, that Rhonda was mentioning in the beginning. What do we need to do? I would think that we need to work together. I think we need to work together. I think we need to coordinate in order to avoid double efforts, because in the end the resources are limited and the work is a lot. There's so much to do on the field. There's so much of things that we cannot do as one sole organization. And I know that Geeti and Rhonda might touch upon this, but we are also, exploring potential cooperations between data.org and GIZ. And I think this is exactly the way that all actors in the development cooperation, we need to aspire for, a better coordination, a better kind of understanding of how can we join efforts to make a bigger impact instead of, acting, so to say, as one actor in a huge field, rather, a whole sector, and then, really looking what are the actions that in the end that have the most impact for for the people who are actually usually left aside, because that's like we were looking to leave no one behind. And are we actually, like, our actions and the projects and the programming of all the resources, is this actually going towards that direction of not leaving no one behind? So that would be like my closing remarks before I need to jump off. But it was a pleasure meeting everyone today, and I am sorry I need to jump off the call.
Well, Mariana, we don't want you to miss your train. We thank you so much for joining us. But audience, please don't go away. We still have a few more minutes to answer your questions. And I think I'll put that same question that Mariana kind of just posed to Giti and to Rhonda. What would it take for donor agencies, funders, civil society organizations, multilaterals, to come together and to really tackle this? What are you seeing, and maybe talk a little bit about, I think maybe in a bit more specifics, how your organizations are actually already working together in a way to do just that.
Sure. So as I mentioned earlier, at data.org, we serve as a platform for partnerships where building data for social impact as a field is concerned. And as Giti and just mentioned, we also work very closely with GIZ, with several areas of GIZ, to continue exploring how do we amplify the impact that's already been achieved. So one of the things that we've done, we have convened various different donors, funders, academia, the private sector, and social impact leaders to talk about how do we work smarter and not harder. And I would say that another thing that is quite an obvious one is to follow the data, right? So we know with specifically with the data talent between now and 2032, there's a gap we're anticipating of about 3.5 million people working in data professions, and probably a substantial chunk of that is going to be for data for social impact. This is what we found in our 2022 report, Workforce Wanted. And so with this report, we know that, with such a big gap, we can't afford to be working in silos. We can't afford to spend time not collaborating and sharing information. So we're also trying to be at the vanguard of being very data-driven in our approach to partnerships building and engagements. And I'll pass to you, Giti, because I know as one of our partners, we're so grateful to be collaborating.
Yeah, I would not repeat what Mariana and Rhonda have already said. It's very, we know we cannot do this without effective partnerships. I would start by saying we also need, on the donor side, working for a donor agency right now, we need collective donor intelligence. And by this, I don't really mean just investments. It's both investment and insights. So donor intelligence in terms of who is working on what and where can we co-invest, where can we find these common resources. Second, on the effective partnerships, I would just like to add on what Rhonda already said. It would be great to have very clear governance structures within these effective partnerships. There is expectations from all partners. I really been in this sector for a few years, but I just am not getting used to this term low-hanging fruit. I guess all of us have heard it, and I'm also hoping many people who are attending this talk also have heard it. I do not like this term at all, and I think it is important to have these things in governance structures when we are starting these projects. I know results are important, but sometimes we need to look beyond and push the envelope on these things. And third, I would also say investing in partnerships, but I would also say investing in the health of the partnerships. We need partnerships that can go a long way, that can really help foster these. when it comes to data, we're developing these common standards. We should go beyond just one reports and be able to spend some more time, like look through the end of the impact of these partnerships and really invest in the health of these partnerships so that we really can stay together as a community and are just not switching partners from one to other based on where our interests lie in terms of the low-hanging fruits. So
such an important point there. I mean, I think we talk about investing in partnerships, but we don't necessarily define exactly what that means or the health of them. I think that's really such a good point. And
I'd also like to add that sometimes the low-hanging fruits are actually rotten. So not always what you want to go for.
That's right. Yeah, they're hanging there sort of for a reason. So we have just a couple of minutes left. We can take a few questions. I'm going to just share. There we go. Right. So feel free to add your questions to the chat. We have, I think, maybe 2 or 3 more minutes, so probably time for 1 or 2 at the most. And I think in the time that we're waiting for any further questions to come in, again, maybe I'll just ask Rhonda or Geeti to speak a little bit about the resources that they shared in the session chat. What are these resources and how can they be useful to our audience today?
Sure. So I shared 2 links. Number one, we launched our kind of gender campaign called Under Over just last month. And so that link spotlights not only several of the case studies that we've produced to date on women working in data, but also spotlighted our work, as Sharon rightly prompted me, for our Gender Data 101 course. So gender is going to be such a big part of what we do, not only because I'm personally passionate about it, but I know the organization is genuinely committed to contributing to positive change there. The second resource that I shared was actually, I curate in my free time a bi-monthly newsletter on gender and mobile that basically looks at all the ways that gender and mobile intersect. And so that article from UNESCO is one of the ones that I found while curating that newsletter. And I was just blown away at the low statistics of women participating in AI. So I'm hoping, particularly in doing my part, I'm going to be doing auditing a master's degree program in the AI area next year. And so just trying to do my part to spread the awareness of the data and underscoring the need for the work that we do.
Wow, amazing, Rhonda, a lifelong learner. That's something we love here, of course, at Tech Change. Everybody wants to learn all the time, and you're just the ultimate example. So I think we do have one question. I'd like to maybe pose it to Geeti, or either of you, actually. This question is from Laura. She asks, can you give an example of risks starting from start to finish? Bad data going in, used for social impact, bad outcomes coming out. Do we have any examples at the tip of your tongue?
I'll give just a very quick one. So I attended South by Southwest EDU last month in Austin, and I attended a panel where a gentleman was talking about a county that's just next door to my home county in Florida. And basically, Panelists County school system is using different data points about children to identify potential problem children and sharing that information with the local law enforcement to kind of almost like, what's that movie with Tom Cruise where they prevent crime before it happens? And so what is happening is this bad data going in is leading to even worse outcomes for children of color and, of course, children who live in poverty. So that's one real life example that's happening now for bad data and bad outcomes.
Thanks, Rhonda. Geeti, I know we are all quite tight on time. I don't know if you have a moment to answer that question or another question we just saw coming in about thoughts on, from Bartholomew here, thoughts on partnering with private sector when it comes to data ownership for women, a very sensitive topic.
Yeah, I mean, well, I would quickly like to comment on a resource that we also have shared, which is the Data to Policy Navigator that we have just launched at the World Data Forum. And this would be actually very actively looking at the new data sources, including the private sector data sources. We will, I mean, it's no surprise private sector has a lot of data, and it is useful. It is useful for also policy purposes, but we need a lot of caution with it. I mean, I think this is like a huge a talk of its own, basically. So I would not go too deep into it, but I would also say that I mean, we have examples right now, like just top of my head examples in entrepreneurship, definitely. Where I mean, private sector is holding a lot of data that is absolutely essential to political decision making. So there is value in collaborating with them. At the same time, it really depends on the kind of partnership you get into, particularly when this data is being paid for, because then you are you're risking kind of you're paying for that policy making, basically, and to make sure that you are you're making policies in your favor, and it's often used for political for all sorts of political interests, good or bad. So yeah, we'll be careful there, I think, and then we explore this a lot more in the Data to Policy Navigator. And I mean, like, the question that Ronda already asked was around the risks. I mean, like, I think gig economy was one thing we already talked about in the beginning, but there are lots of, with ChatGPT coming in, we are talking about like women's CVs, how certain professions are naturally become like male professions, female professions. These are the common ones. But I'm sure we can discuss a lot more of them, which some of them like even a lot more harmful than the ones we just stated.
Well, thank you so much, Geeti, for that additional answer there, for kind of hitting a few of these questions all at once. And I know you do need to head out because you are actually attending 2 conferences at once, one in China and one virtually here with all of us around the globe. And so I think we'll, unless Ronda, you'd like to answer the question on your thoughts for partnering with private sector, we can.
No, that's okay, because I know we're short on time.
Okay, great. Okay, well, we've I think officially exceeded our time here. We really appreciate all of the audience engagement, and a special thanks to Mariana, to Geeti, and to Ronda for their perspectives, their insights, and sharing these great resources with all of us today. So we wish you a great rest of your GDDF, many other sessions hitting on AI and talking about gender throughout the rest of the programming. You can watch something you missed. Everything's recorded on the platform. We look forward to seeing you around as the rest of this conference progresses. Thanks, everyone.
Great, thank you.